Thank you for joining the RTC Specification Subcommittee meeting. Chair Jeremy Levitt, staff is ready for you to begin.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Chair Jeremy Levitt. For the record, I'd like to call to order the March 10th, 2021 meeting of the RTC Specifications Subcommittee. RTC staff will begin with a roll call of subcommittee members and introduce staff on the line.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. This is David Gloria, Management Analyst for the RTC for the record. I'll be calling your name in alphabetical order. Please confirm your attendance as I read your name. Brandon Bentley.
Here.
Shane Dennett.
Here.
Jimmy Floyd.
Here.
Mike Hudgens.
Here.
Jim Keane.
Here.
Chair Jeremy Levitt.
Here.
And Abby Mayrena.
Here.
Thank you. Also, please note that we have several RTC staff on the line for today's meeting. This includes Mr. John Penuelas, Senior Director of Engineer, Mr. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering, Ms. Gina Kendall, Principal Project Engineer, Ms. Julia Yuravich, Senior Project Engineer, Mr. Chris Swarth, Project Engineer, and Mr. Ken Satowski, Engineer Technician. Thank you, Chair Levitt.
All right, thank you. Mr. Damiani, for the first item, I'll turn it over to you.
Oops. Sorry about that, I was muted. Thank you, Chair Levitt and members of the subcommittee. Joe Damiani, Manager of Engineering for the record. The first item on the agenda is to conduct your first citizens participation period. As you know, on March 22nd, 2020, the State of Nevada Executive Department issued Declaration of Emergency Directive 006, which suspended the requirement to have a physical location for public meetings. Pursuant to Directive 006 and for the health and safety of the community, this meeting is being held virtually. To allow for public participation, the RTC is accepting public comments via email at publiccomments@rtcsnv.com. Comments can be submitted to be read aloud or to be added directly to the written record. Mr. David Gloria will read the public comments received by the RTC.
All right, thank you, Joe. This is the first time set aside for public comment. This time is limited to comments on items included on the agenda. Comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Levitt. David Gloria again for the record. There are no public comments received at this time.
All right, thank you. Moving on. Mr. Damiani, turn it over to you for item number 2.
Thank you, Chair, Mr. Chair Levitt. Item number 2 is to approve the minutes. The minutes are in order and ready for your approval.
All right, are there any comments on the minutes from the committee? Not hearing or seeing any. I do have a motion to approve the minutes.
Jim Keane with Boulder City. I'll move to approve the minutes.
All right. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. Aye. All those opposed, say nay. Motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item. Back to you, Joe, for item number 3.
It looks like we lost Joe. His audio may have disconnected.
Want me to go forward with that?
Let's see if he can reconnect here in a few.
I apologize for that. My audio got dropped.
Thanks to have you back.
Can you hear me now?
Okay, yeah, we hear you now. We're on item number 3.
Yep, so thank you, Chair Levitt. Item number 3 is to approve revisions to Uniform Standard Specification Section 208, Trench Excavation and Backfill. At our last meeting, we discussed the possibility of revising Section 208, specifically regarding the trench plate requirement in section 208.03.21. The county requested at that meeting, the previous meeting, the removal of method number 2. After a good discussion, it was determined to revise the speed limit in method 1 and 2 from 45 miles an hour to 30 miles per hour. And that is what is in front of you today. So staff would recommend that the subcommittee approve the proposed revisions and authorize staff to send it out for industry review and move it to the executive advisory committee for approval.
Okay, thank you. Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee? All right. Yeah, we talked about this a bit last time. So, hearing no comments, do we have a motion to follow staff recommendation?
This is Shane, City of Henderson. I'll motion to follow staff recommendations.
Okay, we have a motion on the floor. All those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. All those opposed, say nay. All right, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Joe Damiani with the RTC. Item number 4 is to approve revisions to Uniform Standard Drawing 313, Streetlight Standard General Notes 314, Streetlight Standard with 2-inch pipe arm 315, Streetlight Standard with double 2-inch pipe arm, and Uniform Standard Specification Section 623L.02.01 Streetlight poles and arms. Members of the subcommittee, there was a lengthy discussion at the last meeting. I want to point out that I think at this meeting, we should discuss some of the agency's concerns and comments and note them to be addressed in the working group that's eventually going to be formed later in this item. I don't feel at this time we're ready to vote on any of these proposed revisions. However, I think it was important to get the dialogue started to find out what's happening. But I do believe it would be better discussed during the working group. And then we'll have a similar discussion at next Operations Subcommittee meeting, which is next week. Therefore, I would recommend that we have a discussion. We will take note of all the discussion and we will bring it forward with the working group. And then I would recommend that we have no motion or action to be taken on this item today. And with
all right. Thank you, Mr. Damiani. We'll move on. Are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee on this item? I'll let everyone else go first. I do have a list to read off for the discussion, but I'll let everybody else go first.
So Jeremy, Jimmy with Clark County Public Works. So I talked with our traffic division. I guess some of their questions are, specifically what testing has been done on these poles to prove that, over the life of the pole that they're, comparable to the galvanized poles. And then also, I think there's a concern as far as theft for, things like the crash cap. And I know when I talked to our traffic division, they wanted to kind of know where these are currently being used so we can talk to those agencies and see what experience they've had with them. And then I guess the kind of the last thing we had was, what is the cost? We're looking at what is the cost compared to a standard galvanized pole in case we have to replace them. That's all I had.
Do you want to talk about any of those, Joe? I mean, like those items, because you might have answers on some of those.
Yeah, I think we have Brandon Bentley with Bartlett with Roth Lighting. So or somebody else could answer. The testing that's been done, the cost, and I think they're being used up north. Jimmy, NDOT's been using them, so they can speak on that. So,
Yeah, this is Brendan with Roth Lighting. We've got Danny Mitchell from HAPCO. Danny, can you address some of the testing and theft questions?
Right. Let me speak
Yep.
to that really quickly. Aluminum poles are widely used throughout the United States. The biggest density market that we have for aluminum poles at this present time in the West would be the state of New Mexico. So across the state of Mexico, on every state highway, the state DOT uses aluminum poles. A lot of municipalities there also use them, ranging from Albuquerque, Las Cruces, and a lot of the smaller ones in between there. Now, as to the testing, all of our aluminum poles used in roadway applications are tested to the most current standards of AASHTO, the Federal Highway Administration. So there's been extensive testing done on those by governing bodies for safety and breakaway adherence. We haven't tested our aluminum poles in comparison to galvanized poles in direct comparisons. But I will speak so much that our aluminum poles come with a lifetime warranty associated with them. So if they were to ever come down due to wind-induced anomalies or due to corrosion, those would be fully warranted by us, and a replacement pole will be provided in that case. So we believe that our poles will outperform galvanized poles, which were built to a 25-year life cycle typically. Our poles will outlast those by decades over the long haul. Costs right now, typically going years past, aluminum was maybe 5 to 10% greater in cost in comparison to aluminum on a direct product cost. But now with the great escalation of steel costs going up and up and up, that aluminum pole should actually be less expensive in your market and other markets moving forward until there's some sort of price correction in the steel market, which may not happen for a couple of years there. We inherently don't see any theft of products from our poles. You know, the handhold covers, you know, they might weigh a few ounces. You know, I don't see any value in stealing those and recycling those. So we haven't had issues with theft of objects from the poles themselves, as would be the case with many municipalities and utilities and departments of transportation. They experience a lot of wire theft associated with their poles, so people going in and pulling wire from them. If that were to be the case in your marketplace, there would be a lot of solutions that we could engineer into the poles. We could move the handholds from, you know, roughly 18 inches above grade to 9 feet above grade, so they wouldn't have easy access to that. We also have lockable handhold covers, which would prevent people from getting access through that handhold entrance to still wire. So that's just a quick talk to people using it. And then other municipalities across the West, you know, so Hayward, Oakland, San Francisco, that Bay Area, Pacific Gas and Electric has just approved HAPCO across the board because they were having a lot of steel poles used in their municipalities that were literally just tipping over, you know, falling over. And unfortunately, to this point, not on any vehicles and not on any individuals, but that certainly could be the case. So they're migrating away from steel to aluminum poles just to avoid the potential for corrosion, and then corrosion potentially will lead to a pole tipping over down the road. And we could provide a lot more references beyond that. As I mentioned, last year driving across northern Nevada, you know, you exit in Ely or Winnemucca or any of those cities, the on-ramps and the off-ramps all use aluminum poles by Valmont, which is a competitor of ours. The State Department of DOT up in Carson City, Nevada, you look at their facilities use nothing but aluminum poles to light their area there. So those are just a few points.
All right, thank you.
Thank you, guys.
Any other comments from the committee?
This is Shane, City of Henderson. Shane Dennett. Definitely understand what you're saying there, and a couple of other I guess a couple of topics is just our concerns is just the variety of stock that the entities would have to carry to replace along to, in having that stock on hand, whether we're replacing steel or aluminum, which can be handled, but it is, something they got to think about. Then bolt patterns, I'm sure you guys will be matching up. I would assume you guys are matching up existing bolt patterns. So if a steel pole gets replaced or knocked down, it could be put up with aluminum or vice versa. So I'm assuming you guys are, preparing for that. And then, just another concern on theft. Just so quick and easy to pull up and undo, four nuts off of some J bolts and lift the pole onto their trailer and pull away. That's a little bit of concern for us as well. I know you probably, like you say, there's wire theft. It's a little more time consuming to pull wire to undo a few bolts and throw it on a trailer is a little bit of a concern for us, but I'm sure we can discuss that in our subcommittee meeting as we go forward.
This is Danny Mitchell with HAPCO again. I can speak to your question regarding bolt patterns. Yes, our bolt patterns would match the existing bolt pattern that you have there, whether it's 9-inch, 10-inch, or if it's a Spectrum. We can actually build in base flanges that would accommodate a range. Pattern could be accommodated as a range. So yes, the intent would be to design our pull designs according to your bolt patterns that you have in the marketplace there. Obviously, the poles would have, they'd have the same look, the same finish, same arms. And so if you'd have to carry an inventory of aluminum poles, just as you'd have to carry an inventory of your steel poles. From what I understand, the local market distribution does. I'll leave it at that for now.
I think, is he breaking up or is that just me?
No, Jeremy, I got that as well.
You cut out, Danny, at the last bit there when you were talking about the.
I'm sorry. Let me just re-summarize then quickly. We would design our poles so that the bolt patterns would match the existing bolt patterns that you are using currently, whether it's in a specific municipality or across the county. And we would have the ability to design our base flanges with a range of bolt patterns built into one existing flange, so it could accommodate anywhere from an 8 to 11-inch bolt pattern. Whatever that range is, we could design and accommodate, but most certainly it would match the existing bolt patterns that are in use there. And then as to the inventory, you'd be required to carry inventory of aluminum poles just like you carry the inventory of steel poles that are being used in your marketplace. The nice thing from what I understand is that local electrical distribution does stock a lot of these, and so they could be used as a facilitator for managing that inventory for every respective municipality in the county itself. Did that come through okay?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was good.
Good.
Okay. Anyone else on committee? I have my sample list. I can go down.
This is Mike Hudgens, City North Las Vegas. So one of the comments that our traffic group had or concerns is how the poles react to vehicle impacts, both kind of low speed and high speed, and any potential liabilities that might be tied to that, as well as just potential pole replacements from minor, backing into a pole or something like that. And that was, I'm sure we've got a lot more kind of questions. It's good to hear that NDOT's using it up north, because that would be a good resource for us to discuss with in this working group that's going to be formed. But that's all I've got from our traffic guys so far.
Again, this is Danny Mitchell with HAPCO. If I may speak to that just question on vehicle impact. I believe in our last conversation, we perhaps a few pictures of poles that were impacted by vehicle at slower speeds. And so there's a dent in the aluminum pole, and yet structurally it stands and has its integrity as if it were originally mounted at that time. So if a vehicle backs into it or bumps into it or drives into it at slower speeds, it would perform just like a steel pole would in those instances. Now, if at a greater speed a vehicle were to run into aluminum pole, it would break away as per AASHTO, Federal Highway Administration there. And again, a pole would do. One of the nice benefits, if an aluminum pole were to come to the ground, as you guys know, it has value, it being aluminum. And so the recycle value is 70, 80, 85 cents on the pound. So you have a 200 pound pole there. You're looking at $160 of recycle value to the city instead of just scrap for the steel or the concrete that comes to the ground.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and go on my list. This list is from Joe Norby, who's our traffic engineering field operations supervisor. And he did work in Albuquerque, so he has some experience with the aluminum there. And there's some of the concerns we have from the city and some of these are duplicate from before, so I'm just going to read them off. Each of our streetlight poles are open and available to be used as host sites for small cell infrastructure. As such, we would need to see adequate loading calculations to show that an aluminum pole could withstand additional related loading. Next one is with our current anti-theft measures, we weld all handholds on our poles. This is easy to do with steel poles. However, we do not have people qualified to weld aluminum in this case. And I know you addressed a little bit that with lockable handholds and other issues, but that's still how we do it wholesale is we weld all the handholds. Next one is there a concern with the difference of metal between the steel base bolts and the aluminum pole base? Just not sure about that. The number 4 was concerns with durability of the pole, similar to what City of North Las Vegas said. Concerns with the durability of the pole during a motor vehicle crash. With a steel pole, we could take a minor hit and still salvage the pole in place. With an aluminum pole, we're not confident we'll get the same durability. That we might save money on poles, but we'll have to replace them more frequently. Next one, with a lighter pole, are there any proposing of modification to the foundation depth? Concerns with this foundation being able to accommodate both an aluminum and steel poles at any time. So my interjection on that item is that there hasn't been any discussion of that, but that would be something we would have to be very careful to not allow the developer or anyone else comes in with a lighter pole and says, oh, well, we don't need a heavier foundation or deeper foundation, because we want to make sure that if this was going to go forward, you have to be able to swap them out with a steel pole. And then last one is prior to providing any approval for the city, we need to review the comprehensive structural analysis of the pole loading. So I think that goes without saying that tests and that you mentioned, the testing and certifications and the structural analysis for these poles, we need to go through those. Because even though they may be used in other areas, we do have some kind of unique things like we use our poles for small cell sites and for a number of other things. Other things come up, and we put things on our poles. We want to make sure that kind of stuff's covered. That's those are the items I wanted to read in. Go ahead if you had any direct comments on those.
Yeah, I again will take a moment here, Chair. Again, Danny Mitchell with Hapco Poles. Our poles, when designed accordingly, can easily accommodate small cell equipment, the microcells, the radio antennas, the Wi-Fi repeaters, broadcasters, all of that. And the existing steel poles that you have in your market at present aren't designed for those right now at present as well. So everything structurally would have to be calculated for additional loading you would be placing on those poles, and that would hold true for aluminum poles as well. But that being said, HAPCO can certainly engineer poles that meet all of your local requirements as far as wind loadings go and loadings go, and also future-proof them by allowing additional loading to be placed on those at a later point in time, such as a 5G antenna on top of the pole. Now, there should be no issue between using an aluminum pole on a foundation with galvanized steel anchor bolts. So those two metals coming in contact with each other would have no structural bearing. They would have no metallurgical bearing as far as promoting corrosion towards the steel anchor bolts or corrosion towards the aluminum pole shaft itself. Now the foundation differences, the foundations that you're setting your your steel poles onto at this very moment would be certainly accommodating our aluminum poles. And so you would just move forward with your existing foundation designs, and we would put our poles on top of that. And I'm not a structural engineer. We do have a structural engineer on with us. His name's David Grubb. But I think the main calculation they're looking at is not so much the weight of the pole structure itself, but the ground line moment. You know, the forces that bear at the base flange and at the foundation there. That's really the key calculation, from what I understand, or one of the more key calculations, is that ground line calculation, that ground line moment. And David Grubb, if you have anything to chime in there, you're welcome to do so, or invite you to do so.
This is David Grubb. Really what Danny has said is true there. I mean, if you're designing the foundation, you're designing it for the maximum load that's going to be on that foundation. So whether it's a steel pole or an aluminum pole, you're calculating your moment from the fixture, the antennas, those types of items. So the steel foundation is probably going to be approximately the same as what you would expect from an aluminum pole.
If I could, Mr. Chair, this is Joe Damiani with the RTC. I have a question for basically Shane and Jimmy. They're primarily on the construction side. The way I understand it, even if it's a steel pole, the submittal that's being provided to the agency has all the requirements that from the manufacturer that it meets the compliance with all the appropriate criteria. Is that correct?
That would be correct.
Because we don't allow somebody to just say, oh, it's a steel pole per the standard drawing, let's put it in. So I guess it goes back to my original point a couple of meetings ago. And I think this discussion has been great because it solidifies really what I have been trying to do, which is these specifications, and that's going to be my emphasis in the working group. These specifications need to be specification driven, and the products that are to be supplied are the requirement of the manufacturer to certify that they meet the specifications that we're asking for. And so I understand everybody's concern, and I understand, structurally, is it going to do all this? But believe me, if we have the criteria in the specification of what this pole is intended to meet, there will be no manufacturer that doesn't provide you the information that their particular product meets it. Otherwise, they wouldn't submit it. So I just want to go back and, that's enough I'm going to say on that, because that's a overwhelming comment I'm going to have on the majority of the sections in our specifications, that we need to be more specification driven and not, particular product or materials given. It's if somebody meets these specifications, it's up to the agencies to say if they want to accept that type of material or not. Not the standard specification shouldn't be dictating what materials are in there. That should be what your agencies want to do. Now you guys all bring up a point about stocking materials, and if that's an agency decision, then that is your right. you have the option to go do all those things because that's your agency and that's how you want to operate. But my point as the specifications, keeper for whatever, we shouldn't restrict the specifications to that. That's what you guys need to do in terms of how you want to manage and operate your city. And that's I'll just leave it at that.
Well, Joe, this is Jimmy. I mean, I think we have every right to specify what materials we like. It's like asphalt. We specify what materials. We just don't say it has to meet these durability requirements. We set specific material types and qualities. And unfortunately, if you just leave a material type out in the open, somebody that's submitting may try to take advantage of it. And if we have found that we're comfortable with the type of materials, such as the galvanized, we're going to put that. But I mean, to just say aluminum's okay without looking at things like fatigue that differs on aluminum versus steel and all the different components. I think we have to consider those. So I think one thing, maybe Danny, one question I wanted to follow up with is what is the lead time on these poles versus steel. And I think just to kind of be fair, that's one of the biggest things that we deal with on projects is lead time on galvanized materials. So
yeah,
if you guys can speak to that.
I'll speak to that really quickly here. Our aluminum poles right now for the utility segment, the municipal segment, small cell segment, and the DOT segments, we're delivering poles in 8 to 10 weeks. So you should be seeing a noticeable improvement as far as lead times go, as far as aluminum poles go. I mean, shorter lead times. We ship from back east. So, we've got 4 or 5 days in transit coming across the country, but yet they're still arriving in 8 to 10 weeks following order submittal there.
And I guess, one thing you guys talked about, and I apologize, it wasn't at the previous meeting, but what's typically the weight difference you see when you compare a galvanized pole versus an aluminum?
A galvanized pole typically is 1/3 the weight of steel and 1/10 the weight of concrete poles. So when it comes to field installation of the poles, your crew's installing these, whether it's contractor driven or you yourself are installing these poles, they should install more efficiently and more easily. And that also holds true to material management, or when you receive them, you can offload 12 of those steel poles at a time as they're bundled, or you could offload them one by one. But regardless, it's a quicker offloading process and management as far as inventory goes as well because of the weight.
All right. Thank you. That's all the questions I have.
I did have one other question for the record, and it's concerning and similar to like the unique situations we have here, but we also have a number of overhead fed, electrical overhead fed streetlight poles, and can the aluminum accommodate that?
Again, this is Danny Mitchell with HAPCO, and yes, they can accommodate that. I can just reference you, and I could provide you drawings. We do overhead spans. Again, in the city of Albuquerque, uses overhead spans running between aluminum pole to aluminum pole, and so yes, they can accommodate that.
Okay. Thank you. Are there any other comments? I'm not hearing any, and this is not an item to be voted on, and we'll take those into account for the working group. And we're moving on to the next item, number 5. Mr. Damiani.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 5 is to approve revisions to Uniform Standard Specification Section 408.S1, concrete collar around manholes. Actually, that should be standard drawing, 408-S1. The City of Las Vegas has brought this item forward due to issues in the field when manholes are mismarked during paving. This can cause the collar to be quite large, which causes increased cost to the agencies during maintenance operations. Therefore, they are proposing to add the 18-inch maximum dimension to the collar dimension. Staff would recommend the subcommittee approve the proposed revision, authorize staff to send it out for industry review, and move it to the Executive Advisory Committee for approval.
All right, are there any comments or questions from the subcommittee?
Jimmy Floyd, Clark County. So I don't know, maybe just this conversation with the rest of the agencies. What are we going to do if they don't comply with this standard? What's the fix? Is that something that should be addressed?
If they put something in that's 2 feet.
Yeah.
2 foot. Like this.
If I could, Mr. Chair, I think the way it was explained to me, Jimmy, to put this item forward was currently that is the problem, that they ask them to remove it and they say, well, no, it meets the 12-inch minimum. So what I think the implication is that if it's greater than 18 inches and they request that it to be removed because it doesn't meet the standard, then they have the right to not accept it and have it removed and replaced.
Yeah, so it'd have to meet the standard, and then we could, just like anything else that doesn't meet the standard, curb and gutter or anything else. Then this just gives each agency the teeth to do that, and there's no reason to have a 2 foot wide, dimension on the collar. But I don't know why they would be putting them in that big, but we get that sometimes.
No, I like it. I think it's just, I'm just trying to think internally what we do, have them replace the asphalt and pave back, how big of a section are we asking them to pave back?
Right.
50-foot section, or because, now we're creating a patch to fix the patch. But I like the maximum dimensions. I'll just go on record and say that. I just think functionally how we're going to make it work in the field.
That's a good point. I think it's pretty sure our agencies kind of figure that out in the inspection process. I guess it'd be the same as right now. Like if they put one in I guess it's a lot easier if they put something in that's smaller. Like if they didn't meet it and only put 6-inch in now, and you could have them pull it out because then it's a little easier to sock cut or keyhole and get it in there. But
this is Shane Dennett with City of Henderson. I understand what Jimmy Floyd's saying. We obviously don't like new, patches in our brand new roadways if they're going in there putting collars and they've mismarked something. So to go in there and have a patch with the new asphalt's not desirable. So I also agree with Joe that, having a maximum basically puts them on the spot to have to turn to the entities for their determination on what the fix is. And so that does help give us the teeth, I guess you could say, to say you've exceeded, here's the consequences, or here's what you got to do to make it right. And if that's following a 5-year no-cut guideline or whatever that each entity decides, that at least gives us the option to go that route if we have a maximum size. So it's probably a good idea, in my opinion.
And Jeremy Levitt, City of Las Vegas, we're in favor of it. We're brought it forward. So are there any other comments? All right, hearing none. Do we have a motion to follow staff recommendations?
Jimmy Floyd, Clark County, I'll make a motion to follow staff recommendations to approve as presented.
All right, thank you, Jimmy. All in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed, say nay. Hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 6 is to convene a working group to review the uniform standard specifications and drawings. This item will create the working group that will meet on the third Wednesday of each month at 9 a.m., potentially starting, I would say, in May. And I say potentially because I also wanted to ask this group if they believe that this working group would be better suited for meeting in person, which would then require us to start them when all restrictions are lifted. But if not, I feel we could start this in May. We would start it off and do it virtually. So that would be a question for you guys. I have drafted a proposed schedule that's included in the backup with the specs and drawings to be reviewed at each meeting. It's an aggressive schedule, but I feel the need that we start with something and then we'll make adjustments as we go. My objective would be that we would start with the meeting, the agenda as is, and as we get through them, we'll go through, we'll do it, and if what we don't get through, we'll move over to the next meeting. But the schedule is intended to bring the appropriate resources from each agency that can speak on each specific item that's there. The other thing is I have a list of members in the backup, and I want to point out that members can be continue to be added because this is a public working group, so it's not a stagnant item, and you can bring whoever you need at each particular meeting to talk specifically about what we want. And we want the expertise at each meeting so that we can really go do a thorough review of these. I would also like to note that it didn't make the list, but we did get Debbie Yamachika from the Flood Control District. She'll be the representative for flood control, so she's on the list. It's just not in your backup. And then if I could first ask if anybody has any additional members that they'd like to add at this time, I'd request that we do the members first, and then we can have a discussion on the schedule, and then potentially answer any questions anybody might have.
Okay, so first question is, any other members that need to be added?
Well, at this time, we could always bring them at the working group meeting, but if anybody has any specific now, we'll get them added to the list.
Yeah, Joe, this is Jimmy, Clark County Public Works. I'll give you I'm not sure who I want to put on this yet, but I'll forward you a name as far as Clark County's representative.
That's perfect. Yeah. And if anybody just wants to think about it and get us, and also Jimmy too, what I mentioned last month or last meeting was, if you could, I would like to have somebody who would be the main Clark County representative, but with the understanding that as we talk about a specific section or a specific drawing, obviously the county would bring the appropriate expertise for those particular areas. But if we had a primary contact, that would be also beneficial, so that they could be making sure that they're bringing the right people as the schedule gets adjusted or anything.
You can put me as a primary contact for Clark County.
Okay, great.
So this is Brandon with the City of Mesquite. We'd like to add Travis Anderson for our primary contact.
Okay, thank you, Brandon.
You're welcome.
Anybody else at this time want to add anybody? Okay, now if anybody has any discussion or questions about the schedule, I'll just give you my maddening attempt. I tried to do the specifications with the material specification, with the drawings that were associated with each, and it got. I was really diligent up to a certain point, and then it started getting overwhelming. So then I just tried to squeeze drawings in where I thought we might have room to discuss them. So that was my attempt at trying to put these together. But like I said, I think it's going to be fluid. I don't think we'll be able to do it in 12 meetings, but that was my goal, was to try to squeeze them in 12 meetings. I'm assuming it's going to take more like 18 to 24 potentially. But in any event, that's my objective. So if anybody has, I don't necessarily think we need to make a change of it at this point, but I would like everybody to kind of take a look at this schedule. And when we do meet with the first working group, if everybody could bring their proposed revisions or send them to me ahead of time, that we can get them out to everybody so that we can do it. If anybody has any better ways of going through this, I'd be open to listening to any of them.
This is Chair Levitt. I may have missed it. They're going to be once a month starting at 9 a.m. How long of a meeting are we looking at?
I'm ultimately was going to start it at 2 hours.
Okay.
But once again, too, if I could, it really only works if everybody's prepared for the meeting, right? And that's why, you know, if everybody shows up at the meeting and we have to go through each thing word by word, but if we did homework ahead of time and people were coming with their proposed revisions, that would be very helpful. And then we might be able to get through, we'd definitely be able to get through a lot more if we had the appropriate, you know, homework done prior to each meeting.
And I assume that getting information to you ahead of time would help organize that meeting.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, you could do either or. You could either send me proposed revisions that I can assemble onto one document, or, you know, I don't have a problem with bringing up each revision, you know, separately. I mean, it's going to be a work in progress on how we get it going, but once we get a flow, I think it'll work pretty good. And then I guess if I had to, you know, talk about the flow, my vision is that we would discuss the specifications on the meeting's agenda, discuss any proposed revisions. Once we're kind of okay with the proposed revisions, then those would be brought back to the agencies to ponder and do all that. And at the next meeting, the first order would be to review, to approve the revisions proposed at the last meeting, so that we have an official record of, you know, we brought these revisions in, and then we basically said, okay, these revisions were proposed, they were discussed, we have some issues with them, we don't, or we like them, we're going to approve to move forward with the next one. So, and I'll have more outline at the first working group meeting or prior to, you know, on how the meeting would flow. But that's what I'm envisioning. If anybody has any comments on those.
All right. Any other questions? I think this is a great effort, and as long as we're all coming together and working together, I think it'll be something to be a part of. And thanks, Mr. Damiani, for putting together. Any other comments on this item?
Yeah, this is Shane, Denton with the City of Henderson. Were we going to talk about virtually or in person? I guess,
yeah, good.
I guess while I'm on, you know, I would probably suggest that maybe we start out virtually so we can get started, if that makes sense. And if the working group decides that it's too difficult or otherwise, you know, they can change at that time. I didn't know what your thoughts were on that.
Chair Levitt, for the record, I think that that's a good plan. I think meeting in person is preferable, but definitely don't want to wait to get started. And I'm optimistic and hopeful that even by May we'll be able to to have some of these restrictions lifted that we can start to meet in person, but at least be on the book in virtual format. Any other comments from the group? We don't.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Hey, Jeremy, let me go ahead, and if there's no other discussion, staff would recommend that the subcommittee authorize the working group to review the standard specifications and drawings and meet as discussed.
All right, can I get a motion to follow staff recommendations?
This is Jim with Boulder City. I'll move to follow staff recommendations.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
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 Aye. And any opposed, say no. Nay. All right, hearing none, the motion carries. Thank you. Moving on to the next item.
Thank you, Chair Levitt. Joe Damiani, RTC. Item number 7 is to discuss topics of interest. This is an opportunity for subcommittee members to share updates or information with other members.
All right, is there anything for the subcommittee that the subcommittee would like to share on this item? I have, Chair Levitt, again, I have one item that just came up, and I'm curious from the group. In this last year, we approved the PG oil as a standard in the Blue Book and switched over from AC30. And I was wondering if anyone has noticed any increase in asphalt costs with that PG oil. Our maintenance group, they have contracts that are heavy on asphalt quantities. Our capital improvements have asphalt in them, but they're not entirely. It's hard to figure if the costs are going up because of different quantities and just the nature of those projects versus an overlay blanket contract and those kind of contracts that have a lot of asphalt, high quantities. They're seeing that the PG asphalt prices are going up, and then even AC30 where they could use it on like parking lots or other areas is still a little cheaper. But I'm just wondering if anybody else is seeing that since we've seen that change. I'm hearing nothing. I guess it's a riveting topic, and I apologize for putting people to sleep with that. All right. So nothing. So I maybe just if anybody hears anything, maybe we can bring it up. And it's not like we're going to change anything back. Not even thinking about that. I'm just curious because there was a lot of kind of promises and from industries like, oh yeah, everything's going to be fine. We can match the prices of AC30, and I don't know if we're seeing that. So it's just one of those things to keep an eye on, perhaps. Any other items or any other discussion? All right. Last item, Mr. Damiani.
Okay, that'll bring us to the last item on the agenda is the final citizens participation period.
This is the second time set aside for public comment. Just a reminder that comments will be limited to the first 500 words, with the remaining words to be included in the written record. Do we have any comments?
Thank you, Chair Levitt. This is David Gloria again for the record. There are no public comments at this time.
All right. Thank you. And that concludes the public comments. Since there are no public comments, that's that section. Thank you. If there are no additional comments, I will close the item. And if there's nothing else, this meeting is adjourned.